All right, 7 o'clock. We will start her up here. Hello, everybody. I'm Doug, and that's Greg Svensson.
Howdy, y'all.
And some of you have been on our webinars before. Some of you have not. And we are going through it like we normally do, just for the people that might not know what we do with non-performing notes. We're Viking Capital Investments, and we buy mortgage notes, and we are an investment firm focused on the purchasing of non-performing notes, I just said. First lien notes across the U.S. We have been buying distressed assets since 2001. And for many years, we have been doing rehabs and rentals. We buy notes from banks and hedge funds at major discounts. And our goal is to help the mortgage holders stay in their homes. VCI works with the investors throughout the United States. We help investors get a better rate of return on their investment money. And that's usually through their IRAs or 401k plans. Our goal is to help investors realize they can be the bank and not have to deal with toilets and tenants and renters.
Be the bank.
We educate investors on a better way of investing. We're sharing our deals we have done and are currently working on, which we are doing tonight. We've got a real interesting one here. And we're partnering with investors and showing them greater returns with their IRAs and 401k plans again. Non-performing note, for those who don't know, it's when a homeowner fails to pay the mortgage for 90 days, it becomes a non-performing note. When a note is non-performing, it is considered in default after 120 days, and the bank will typically have to make a move on it and liquidate it as a non-performing note to investors such as Greg and I, or take it to foreclosure.
Which, when they have thousands of these things, it's not really practical or time sensitive, and that's one of the big reasons they're putting them out on the market to folks like us.
And a lot of times, depending on what states they're in, the foreclosure process takes a lot longer. So some of the non-performing notes, before they get to the foreclosure stage, they're ready to liquidate them quicker, so they don't have to deal with the lawyers and all that to do. When VCI buys a non-performing note, we have 3 exit strategies. And our first and foremost is modifying the loan to help the borrower stay in their home. A deed in lieu, which is basically cash for keys, or they just give us the paperwork where the borrower signs over the deed to the property. And then if all else fails, we take the foreclosure. Real quick, our process in finding notes and our due diligence. This doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of hard work. And we look through tapes with assets on them every week. We usually look at about 100 to find 10 to 15 good ones. And we scope out the area the assets are in through Google and make sure they're in good areas. You look at the rents comparables to the principal and interest that the people are paying with their mortgage. And we search through county records to determine unpaid taxes. That's a big part of it. You don't want to look at a note and say, yeah, that looks good to me, and then find out they got $5,000 or $6,000 in back taxes they haven't paid. We have realtors that are boots on the ground for us, drive by and take a look at the condition, take pictures, and give us comps on the worth. And here is our first example. I've got a lot of calls on this one. And Greg and I thought it would be very interesting to bring this one up because there's about 3 different exit strategies with this. This is a 2-flat in Chicago. That means it's 2 doors. There's 2 units in it. Each one of them has 3 bedrooms and 1 bath. And the purchase price for this note, non-performing note, would be $155,000. They owe $200,000 on it. And the realtor comps on this in the area is $400 to actually $500, but I put $475 instead. It's more like $450 to $500, but you always want to go down a little bit, not as much at the high point. The rents in the both of these units are about $1,800 each, so there's $3,600 a month coming in on this. And this particular borrower has not paid in 3 years. So the exit strategy,
Amazing.
yeah. So the exit strategy for this would be to take this one to foreclosure, and that would probably be about 12 months. And the ROI on this, just by taking it to foreclosure, if it does take only 12 months, would be about a 23% return.
And that's just to get it to the O point. At that point, you've now got
Yeah.
an REO, and you're able to go straight to the market.
And that's your worst case scenario. If that's all that's said and done, your return on money in that 12 months is really, really good. And this is really close to Rush Memorial Hospital, which I believe is right across the street. And it's a real decent neighborhood. And it's only a couple miles away, not miles, excuse me, it's only a couple blocks away from the United Center where the Chicago Bulls and the Chicago Blackhawks play.
They've had a big renaissance down there in the last 20 years. Much of it when the Bulls were on their run, but that whole area, which was really downtrodden, is come back big. So from a real estate point of view, it's a good one to have as an asset.
Yeah, and the fact that this guy hasn't paid in 3 years, that's huge because he's been pocketing the money. Greg, right before we started this, you figured out.
This guy's taken in about $129,000 and has paid nothing out to the bank. And which leads us to the whole discussion of the foreclosure. Can a guy stand in front of the judge and expect the judge to give him any kind of slack when he's basically swindled the bank out of this kind of money?
Yeah, not only that, what doesn't make sense the most is that his principal and interest was only about $1,000. So
yeah, and he's taking $3,600 in. It's crazy.
Yeah, and you got to take into consideration that he's got taxes and stuff, but still, he's probably taking in at least $2,000 a month, and he's not paying. It's blows you away when you try and figure it out. But anyways, we tell you that the first thing that we try to do is a modification on these loans. There's no chance that there's going to be a modification with this guy. He hasn't paid. He's working the system.
And if you reached out to someone like that for a modification, they say, sure, absolutely. They'd modify. They may pay a couple of months, and then they'd stop. And then you'd be back in court, and he would stretch it out. You'd be at square one, so you'd have to go all the way back. But now going into it, you've got 3 years of non-payment, and the courts would view that much more favorably to the debt holder.
When we look at these, there's not a chance we would take it into modification when we have the history of this. I mean, of course, we want to keep
exactly
the people in their properties and things like this, but he's just renting this out and taking the money. So there's not a chance we would try and modify this. We would be crazy too. But this was built in 1995, so it's relatively new. Again, a purchase would be $155, and they owe $200,000. And we've gone through the realtor comps on this. Now, the return on investment would be 11.5% on this, just because this is another exit strategy, and we've got 4 of them here. And the reason is because we're just trying to teach you guys the different exit strategies that can be done. When you foreclose on a home and you buy an REO or foreclosed property, you're going to fix it up and either put it as a rental or resell it as a fix and flip. When you buy a note, the exit strategies can be 5, 6, 7 different things. And we're just hitting on 4 of them tonight because of the fact that the first one isn't going to happen. There's no modification being done here. So the exit strategy on this is if there's a deed in lieu, he's saying, I'm ready to leave the property. Now, the thing we have to take into consideration here is this number right here, this $200,000. This is called buying a note with equity. And Greg and I usually don't do it, but this one is very interesting. And we think that with a couple of scenarios that we might be looking at, there could be a good chunk of change at the end. Now, with it being worth, $400 to $475, we'll just keep with that. The exit strategy on this property, the cash for keys, if he's smart enough, he goes to a realtor and says, hey, Mr. or Mrs. Realtor, what is the property worth? And the realtor comes up with this, which they're going to come up with something bigger. It's definitely not going to be 200 grand. That's going to be a bit of a push or a fight to take control of the property. Now, on this strategy here, the equity in the property is there, so cash for keys could be substantial. He may walk away for 50 grand in 5-6 days, or 75 or 100. Now, with the scenario that I've put together here, if you sell it at 375, which is way below the 475, minus your 255 that you have in it, let's just say you gave him 100 grand, you got $120,000 profit. And this is kind of one of those things where it's a roll of the dice, because you don't know what the situation is for the mortgage holder, but who knows? No kidding with rolling the dice. Maybe he owes somebody money, maybe doesn't, who knows?
But you have an educated guess here too, again, because he's so far in the hole, there's a good chance the courts will recognize this guy as being less than honorable and move to foreclose in our favor quickly. So you can always use that argument. You want to take a $50,000 cash settlement right now and walk, or do you want to fight us in court and end up with nothing? And that's a motivation.
And the good possibility is going to be 12 months down the road, or 8 months or 7 months, where a cash investor can say, hey, what would you like to walk away and give us the deed in lieu, sign over the deed to us?
And there is a chance we could get the additional rents. If you were to fight it, have those rents escrowed instead of him just pocketing it. If this was the worst case scenario, he's going to walk at 100K, you're at 155, now you're at 250, and that, Greg, that's pretty low, right? That's very low. That's very low for that area of Chicago. That's very low.
Yeah, so I mean, you can tell I'm going low on this, but anyway, you're selling it at 400, you get the point. But even if you sell a quick, somebody just wants it at 375.
Well, that's fire sale numbers if you just want to blow out an asset. But if you want to sit on it and run it through the high times, maybe after the Super Bowl, you may hit that 450, 475.
Well, I'm just saying that's 120. That's 120K and not in a short period of time there.
Exactly.
And that's what this is. This is not. These are just 4 exit strategies of what can happen, and it's fun for Greg and I to go through this on this webinar, just to let people see the different ways you can take a non-performing note and work with it. Again, there is a lot of equity in this property. But again, there's another chance that he sees the money and takes it and leaves.
We've seen it before.
Again, we've gone through all of this. It's just there because we're talking about the exit strategies, and it's just good if you got a pen and paper to write that down or have it in the background. Now, this one, exit strategy, is this is when you already have it back. You already have the renters in place. So you could keep it or you could sell it, but this is what they call, when you get a property back like this, a turnkey rental. Obviously, it's only a turnkey rental if they're paying, but the tenants are already in place. So again, what's he going to walk away from? 50, 75, 100? Who knows? But it's worth throwing out there. So all in at 255 again. 195 equity at 450. There you go. I mean, you got a lot of equity in the property if you decided to keep the building.
And some people would keep. You say, well, why would they do that? Why wouldn't they just sell it? Well, some people can put this in their portfolios for a long-term annuity, or they can use it for a depreciation play. There's lots of reasons to keep a property. A lot of times these notes and these properties will go in 401ks or for kids, their college funds, things like that. So that's a reason. It's one of the reasons. And roughly, the rough numbers are, if you got a $450,000 property, let's say, and you're taking in $43,000, that's obviously like a 10% year-over-year return. So, and then of course you get appreciation. So that's one of the reasons you would keep the property versus just liquidating it.
We're trying to educate people on what's going on out there, and some of the numbers that people don't understand are staggering. We have a return on investment there of 17%. CDs right now are paying 1%. Annuities are paying 4 to 4.5% max, and you have to you have to hold those 5 to 10 years. And there's usually a contract on that. That means you can't get out of it. You're holding that for 5 to 10 years. And if you want to get out of it, you're paying severe penalties.
Yeah, a note really skates around all those things, and for that play, it's a very good alternative to
bond rates. Bond rates are at 3.85% return. If you guys want to check any of this stuff out, be my guest. Go Google it.
Or you could put your money in the stock market at all-time highs.
Yeah, and not sleep at night because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow.
No, it's going even higher. It'll keep going. It'll never stop.
The stock market has averaged about 6 to 8%, and it's topped out at 8% or 9% in a 10-year span. Google that too. Okay, so this is the other example here of the same property. If you were to take the people out and rehab both units, and we've rehabbed a lot of properties, so this is off the cuff, but we're looking at tops 20 to 25, we believe, per unit. So just roughing it out, I put 45 in there to hit the 200. And again, there's equity in the property, all in at 300 grand. Minus one equals 195. And that's a profit at 495. If you're selling at the top end of 500 grand, which we talked about earlier. So again, you guys can see there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. You could sell the property after you get it back to a real estate investor that's going to drool over a property like this and take the rental income, and they're not as savvy as you, and they'll be taking very little as rate of return. Or you could keep it yourself at the amount you're buying it at and have a nicer rate of return. Or worst case scenario, after 12 months, you have a 23% return on your money. There's a lot of people out there that would settle for 4 or 5%. You guys have been following us for a bit, so you understand there's better than that. If you're not making more than 7%, you better call Greg and I, because we're gonna need to talk. So anyways,
Yes,
that's this one building, and again, it's a lot of fun to look at the 4 different ways on this.
The takeaway from this, folks, is that it's a little more money on the note, but you have a lot of strategies to make a very high yield, and it's really what you'd call a home run note if you take it all the way. So
yeah, and your worst case scenario is that he owes 200 grand. You're buying at 155. You're
and they pay it off in a year, and you make $45,000.
Yeah. Now, a lot of people have been calling me, asking me about performing notes. I know we talk about non-performing notes a lot, but we looked at this one. This is a re-performing note. And this is kind of segueing into what I was saying to you before. Principal and interest on this is interesting. Now, 442.77 over, it's a little bit over 7% rate of return. People would die to have that. That's amazing to a lot of people. But 3 bedrooms, 2 bath, 1,320 square feet, and it's a townhouse. And this is in Arizona. They owe $99,800. Taxes are $420. Wow, beautiful. I'd love to see $420 taxes a year. And the rents are about $1,000 to $1,200. Purchase on this is $73,000. and the worth on it is 105. Now, the 7%, in a lot of people's eyes, I might even take this one, because here's the point. 7% per year, the maturity on this property, on this townhouse, 2052. So that it would intrigue a lot of investors to pick up this note. Over 35 years left in payments. That's why it's on our webinar right now.
And what it is basically it's a steady income. You know, we talk about 7% being, you know, kind of average in 401ks, but you're talking about a steady year over year payment. And if something were ever to happen, let's say for some reason they want to refinance out of it, well, then you're going to get paid the full debt amount off immediately.
You're going to get paid off for whatever's left on the loan.
So any discount we got on the note gets paid off, and that's faster return.
Now the principal and interest on this, he or she is paying $442, right? They're also paying the taxes. Now the rents are $1,000 to $1,200, but if you had this as a rental and the refrigerator goes up, furnace, AC, whatever you want to call it, you're paying for it. You're taking this in as mailbox money per month, $442.77, and that's what the banks do. That's why Greg and I say, be the bank. You're taking it $442 a month, and you're not dealing with anything. The mortgage holder that signed the book, they're paying for everything that goes wrong with the property.
And you see there's huge motivation to pay that $420 plus roughly $36 a month in taxes and a little bit more for insurance. Because look, if he's got to go rent that same building, he's between $1,000 and $1,200. So for them, it's a no-brainer to make sure they keep that mortgage paid.
Right. And it's not as much as you would like, but when you look at what you're paying for it, it makes a lot of sense. And they're doing all the upkeep in the property and everything else. It's really a no-brainer, guys. Here's an example 3 we have. This is in Tampa, Florida. This one's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, little over 1,000 square feet house. The property values have really gone up in the Florida. Well, after the hurricane, who knows? But this is what they are right now as of today. It was 156. It's not worth that. But taxes, again, look at these taxes. I couldn't believe that, $260. I had to wipe my eyes a couple times because I was like, I'm not seeing this right. Rents are $1,200, so he's under there. He's still under with his taxes, so he's going to stay. And this one, I believe, let me check this one real quick. Yeah, this one.
I mean, look at the discount on the note. You're buying the note at $65,000.
This is reperforming too. This is a performing note. So this is a good deal. You guys are reading all of it. You're faster than I am. But anyway, the rent.
Look at this. There's about $90,000 in from what he owes to what you're paying the note on. And we don't really have the update on the value of this house, do we? Oh,
yeah,
no, we got 115. So there's no way he's going to ever get out of this. You know, he bought this at the top. So you're at 65. It's worth 115. You're what? You're at 35, 40. You got 50,000 in equity in the property, and values are starting to go back up in Florida.
Yeah, and you got 20 years left of payments.
So even though he's upside down in how much he owes on it, he's still way cheaper than if he's got a rent. And if he does take off, you've got a $50,000 equity in the property if he walks.
Greg, I'll be surprised if we have this tomorrow. Return on investment on this per year is 16%. And like I said, the maturity date on this, which means when it's the mortgage is up, it's 2037. You got 20 years left, and your purchase price is $65,000. If you guys don't see the money in this one, then you never will. But this one's going to go quick. That is a great deal, and it's $156 that he owes. You're buying. Now that's his mortgage. That's what he owes right now. You can renegotiate anything you want after you own it with a non-performing note. But again, you got to remember this is a performing note. So you're just taking on the 115, but you're purchasing it at 65.
Doug, is there any money left in the hardest hit fund in Florida?
I do believe there is.
Well, here's another thing, folks. If a guy's like this who's upside down, he's got way more money he owes than the property's worth. There is a federal program called the Hardest Hit Fund, where they can get assistance to for the note owner, ourselves, to help them modify their note by reducing their overall debt, which we, in fact, as note holders, would be the beneficiary of, and they would have it can reduce their payment, but also reduce their equity. Or I should say principal, on the note. And that's something it's not easy like just filling out a form and you get it. You've got to make a case for it, and there's steps, but it is out there.
People are lazy. You got to fill those things out, and sometimes you ask them to do it and they don't do it because they don't believe it's real, that the government's going to help them. But in this case, this couldn't happen because he started paying it back, and the loan was negotiated at about 115. So he owes 156 on it, but it's reperforming notes. So the hardest hit funds, it cannot be used unless there's been some non-payments, and then you can use the hardest hit funds. And that's in the lower states for the most part, Indiana, Tennessee, Florida, Missouri.
And the other thing is what goes up can go down, but can also go back up. And if, say, there's a surge in values in Florida again, and this interest rate is not appealing, he may refi out of this thing. And if he did, well, that's pretty self-evident of what you would get, because just in that you would collect the difference in the equity, or I'm sorry, the principal of the note. You get that money. So we're buying at 65, but he owes, whatever. You'd get that all back.
Yeah. Well, the most important thing here is all the scenarios we can do. We can look at this if it was a non-performing note, but it's paying. It's paying right now. He's paying. Look at this. He's paying $880 a month. That's your mailbox money each month, and you can get that for the next 20 years. So
10,500 times 20. It's $211,000 if you carried it to term.
What is it?
$211,000
for $65,000 over
20 years. Yeah, for 20 years.
Greg, do you know how many people that have Roth IRAs and self-directed IRAs and 401k that have no clue about this stuff, Greg?
Too many.
They have no idea that they can do anything better than 5%.
We need to start superimposing our phone number on the bottom there so you can keep pointing at it. It's like, call us.
Are you kidding me? Speaking of which, so you guys know you've been with Greg and I on webinars before. We're pretty short and sweet. Those are just some deals we had come into us in the last week here, and we thought we'd share it too. And we're going to try and do this each month, show deals we're working on. We've told you guys what performing and non-performing notes are. You're pretty smart people. You get it. We're just trying to show you some exit strategies that were in that first one and show you some performing notes. We show you a lot of non-performing notes. But anyways, I'm Doug. This is Greg. And we're Viking Capital Investments, LLC.com. You can reach me a lot quicker at Doug at Viking Capital Investments, LLC.com. That's our 800 number. You can connect with us on LinkedIn and Facebook. And I have the Illinois Non-Performing Note Meetup. And you can find us on YouTube. Please, anybody that sees our stuff on YouTube and you like it, hook up with us and become a member. You won't get emails every day or anything like that. It just helps to get the word out there. So that's about it. Greg, you want to add anything?
No. Good webinar. You got some real good deals here, and folks, come and join the party.
Yep, we will talk to you later on. Everyone have a good evening. Bye now.
Bye.